Hello, period six. What's going on, people? Just here to go through some slides today and to talk a little bit about the next time we meet, which will be quiz time. And just to give you a heads up, I'm not sure if I mentioned to your class yet. I've been losing track of what class is what day, all this other stuff. So, third cycle is done. The grades in there are the grades in there. I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks, if you have something that you made up, you need to private message me and let me know that you've done something late and handed it in, and then I can go check it. I do not get notified when you finish something unless you tell me via private message. So hopefully the grades are good, the grades are gone, everything. The last thing did, which was pesticides, that started fourth cycle. So pesticides is fourth cycle, and everything onward, including this and the first quiz that we have next time we meet. Okay? So I'm going to get right into the slides a little bit and talk about them. Then at the end of this, I'll talk a little bit about the quiz that we have the next time we meet, which is what? Tuesday, right? So that's when the quiz will be. So stick with me, go through the slides. I'll break these down a little bit. We have been talking about agriculture since March 27th. So if you go back, the quiz is going to be from 327 to this one today, including this one today. So it's about 4 or 5 slideshows. I think it's lesson 2 through lesson 7. So just go back and check those out, but I'll talk more about that later. We've been talking about agriculture. We've been talking about the way we make food. We've been talking about how important agriculture is. We were talking about things like the Green Revolution. We were saying things like crop rotation. We were talking about GMOs and genetic engineering. We were talking about irrigation and the nutrients in the soil. So we were talking about a lot of different things when it comes to agriculture. Last thing we talked about was pesticides and the use of pesticides and the dangers and the pros and cons of them. Today, we are piggybacking off of that by talking about something called integrated pest management. Now, we don't just spray pesticides whenever we feel like it just to be proactive and not have anything kill our crops. We used to do that. We don't do that anymore because we know how dangerous pesticides are. So there is a process that you have to go through to get to the point where you have to spray pesticide, all right? And that process is called integrated pest management, IPM. Okay, so I'm on the slides now. I'm moving to slide 2, which is the agenda, and you can look at that at your leisure. I'm moving to slide 3, which is a review on the last thing we did, which was pesticides. So you can go through those and see what you remember at your leisure. Slide 4 is, as always, the objective, which you are going to be able, at the end of this lesson, to explain integrated pest management, to be able to break it down, to be able to explain each part of the 4-part process. Slide 5. Slide 5 talks about what IPM is. I'm not going to say integrated pest management anymore. I'm just going to use the initials IPM, integrated pest management. So you can do that too if you're writing it on a test or a quiz. IPM isn't a single pest control method. It's a series of managements, evaluations, decisions, and controls. All right. So it's a process that a farmer, agriculture industry has to go through. Right? There are 4 steps to IPM. Those 4 steps are listed here. Step 1 is setting action thresholds. Step 2 is prevention. Step 3 is monitor and identify pests. And step 4 is control. Now, those are the 4 steps. So if a question asks you what the 4 steps are, you can just write that. The next 4 slides, we are going into what each step details, okay, which you also are going to be required to know. So, step 1, set an action threshold. What does that mean? A threshold is a point that is set. And if you pass that point, an action needs to take place or an action takes place. For instance, I can have a threshold. Personally, I can have a threshold of patience. My patience threshold is right here today, which means I have a lot of patience, right? Well, if I have kids or whatever, wives or whatever, dogs, testing my patience and I'm over here, it's okay, I'm still patient. But if it gets too crazy and they pass my patience threshold, then an action takes place. I'm usually, I've lost my patience and blah, 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 blah. I freak out, right? Well, when you set an action threshold, you set a point. And IPM does this by taking a couple variables into consideration, all right? They set and they set an action threshold for each farm, for each kind of crop, for each whatever, because every threshold is going to be a little different depending on what pests might be there, depending on how big the crop is, what you're growing, and everything else. Okay. So the way they set a threshold is they look at a couple variables. They say, the farmer goes outside and he looks around his fields and he sees a caterpillar, and a caterpillar happens to be a pest, right? And the farmer freaks out. Oh my God, I got pests. Oh my God, I got pests. I got caterpillars. They're going to kill my crops. Chill out, dude. You saw one caterpillar, right? You didn't see a million caterpillars screwing up your crops. So seeing a single pest does not always mean control is needed, right? You see one or two caterpillars on 20 acres worth of crops. Oh, chill out. You don't know you have a problem yet. That's the point there. And also, we talked about percentage of crops lost to pests, right? And we said in the 40s there was like a 7% loss of crops due to pests, right? And that was an acceptable loss, right? So there is an acceptable loss for every farm, and that percentage has to be, maybe it's 15%. If more than 15% of the crop is lost to pests, then it becomes a problem because you don't make money, right? So the two variables I'm talking about here is number of pests and economic threat. Okay, so those are the two things they use to set a threshold. So they say, okay, for this farmer's farm with the caterpillar as a pest, we're going to say, all right, because of the area you have and because of where you are and because of what you're growing, we're going to set the pest threshold at, let's say, 2,000. Right? So that means if you can count and identify 2,000 caterpillars, more than 2,000 caterpillars on your land, you've broken that threshold, right? So that's one way to do it. The other way is to set the economic level. Like, okay, we have an economic threat. If you lose more than 15% of your crops to pests, we have an economic threat. So 15% of crop loss is going to be the economic threshold. So they take these two variables and they make a threshold. And they say, okay, more than 2,000 caterpillars on your property, and more than 15% is your threshold. Okay, that's what they do. They set a threshold. Slide 7. Step 2, prevention. Once they set a threshold, right, they know when it becomes dangerous and an action has to take place, right? So until that happens, until any of those thresholds are crossed, you don't just sit back and relax, right? You do what's called preventative maintenance. You try to prevent that threshold from being reached, right? So you do everything you can. And there can be a bunch of different things. For instance, if you have a lawn and some people are crazy about landscaping and they cut their lawn and they make it beautiful and they want it to look so good. I don't care. I just cut it. I don't care what's going on, right? And if I see weeds and stuff outside on my lawn, I don't care. I wait till I mow it again or I spray it with a weed spray, right? But there's some people that are very proactive about their lawns. They want their lawns to look perfect all the time, right? So they'll cut their grass. And even if there are no weeds, they'll take preventative measures. They'll spray some natural stuff down so weeds don't grow, right? They'll make sure they trim around things where weeds can be prevalent so they prevent it. Right? Same thing with crops. They'll try to prevent things from becoming pests. So in agriculture, they may use different types of agriculture methods like crop rotation. If you're moving your crop around all the time, sometimes certain pests don't have time to find where that is and settle and cause a problem. So if you have your crop in the same place every year, the pests know where they are and they can inhabit it, and then they just know where to go for the food, right? But if you're constantly moving your crops around, it takes more time for pests to move in and find that area. So that's a way to prevent pest buildup, right? Farmers can also buy pest-resistant varieties of crops. There are pest-resistant varieties of crops. There's seeds that are genetically engineered to be pest-resistant. They're more expensive or whatever, but certain types of food, certain type of crops, you can get pest-resistant varieties. So that's interesting, right? And these controls, you can also do regular things. Like sometimes it's not just small insects that are pests. Sometimes deer can be a pest if you live near forests, right? They can come in and they can eat some of your crops, and that can be a problem. So maybe just putting up a fence around your stuff would be a way to prevent some pests from coming in, right? These control methods, this prevention, this is usually very cost effective. Sometimes it can be very effective at preventing pests from coming, and it doesn't cause any harm to us or the environment. It's just proactive preventative measures. So that's what a farmer should be doing after that threshold is set, that's what they should be doing on a daily basis. That's what their job is, to keep their crops healthy, right? And to prevent pests from coming in. All right, slide 8. Slide 8 is to monitor and identify pests, okay? So monitoring and identifying pests is important. Identifying pests. Not all insects that are on a farm, not all weeds that are growing in the ground require control. They're innocuous. They're not dangerous. They're just living there. They're not a problem. They're not going to get to a threshold. They're not going to destroy your crops. Look, you have an area. It's outside. There's going to be things there. There might be worms. There might be whatever, right? So not all insects, not all weeds, not all plants are going to be pests. Some are even beneficial. Ladybugs are beneficial. Ladybugs eat certain types of pests on crops, little insects, right? Little mites and stuff like that. So if you have ladybugs on your farm, it's actually a beneficial thing to have. So, you have to identify the pest. That's the first thing. Identify what is actually a pest and what is actually doing damage, right? Because there's lots of different living things on your farm. And then the monitoring. You have to monitor, right? You can't just set a threshold, put up a fence to prevent, and that's it, and sit back until the crops are done. You can't do that. You have to monitor and make sure. So that farmer that went outside and saw a couple caterpillars, he has his threshold set. He didn't freak out. He uses his preventative measures, right? He knows that he's identified the caterpillars as a pest in his crop, and he goes out on a daily basis. This is his livelihood. This is his job. He goes up and down. He looks at his crops. He sees if he can identify any more caterpillars. He sees if if the population's growing, whatever, right? So he's monitoring his situation because this is his money, right? It's the same thing in anything. You're always taking care of that because you know that it's going to be about feeding yourself and your family and making money. Right? So that's the monitor and identifying pests. Slide 9, control. So this is step 4. You've set action thresholds. You've done preventative maintenance. You've monitored it carefully. You've identified what is a pest and what isn't, right? And at some point, you realize that the threshold has been broken, or you're getting very close to the threshold, and you need to take action, right? Step 4 is action. Step 4 is the control. So IPM programs evaluate which control method is proper. And they do that by saying, okay, we're going to try the effective, less risky pest controls first. Again, they're not flying around dumping poison yet. No such thing as pesticides yet. We are not dealing with pesticides yet. We're trying to avoid pesticides at all costs, right? So there's a couple different methods that they can try in agriculture. One of them is called biological control. Biological control is what we talked about when we talked about bullfrogs a couple of months ago. Bullfrogs, we said the population of bullfrogs, right? The population of bullfrogs was exploding, and we tried to control them by introducing a predator of the bullfrog, the largemouth bass, right? So the largemouth bass, that fish would eat the tadpoles of the bullfrogs. So we introduced that predator to the pond, and we let nature take its course. That's biological control. And they do that on farms in agriculture. For instance, the ladybugs, right? I have a friend who loves gardening. He's got this huge garden. It's kind of crazy, but he loves it. It's what he does. And in his garden, when he starts to get certain things eating, I don't know what pest it is, but when he starts to get this certain bug that starts eating the leaves of his lettuce and stuff, he goes on Amazon and he buys like 100,000 ladybugs. You can actually buy ladybugs because he just dumps them out. Right? He buys them and he dumps them out in his garden, and they live in his garden and they reproduce and they do all that stuff and they feed off of those pests. So that's a form of biological control because he doesn't like to use fertilizers and he doesn't like to use anything like that. So he uses ladybugs to control the pests in his garden, which I think is pretty cool. You can also try to disrupt their mating rituals. What that means is you can use natural chemicals called pheromones. Pheromones are natural chemicals that are made by animals, and it's they're made for at a bunch of different times. But pheromones are often made and released in an animal when it's time to mate. So males and females can know when mating is when they're ready to mate, when it's mating season. These pheromones are released, and they are an attractive force. You smell them, and they're an attractive force to these animals to know that it's mating time. Well, you can target those. You can turn those off, or you can add you can add different pheromones to that, so you can disrupt the mating season. So you're actually taking away their desire to do it. So that's the way that works. And then there's mechanical control too. Mechanical control is just simple things like trapping or weeding, right? So farmers, if they have weeds and they're becoming a pest and there's a lot of weeds on their farm, they don't necessarily need to spray them with poison. Sometimes they will walk around their fields or hire somebody, and they'll go and they'll just weed. They'll just pick them out. On a daily basis, that will be someone's job all day. 6 hours a day, walking up and down the fields and just picking the weeds. Right, that could be something. And oftentimes that's something that when you have a farmer who a real farmer who that is their living and that's what they do all day and every day, it's usually becomes a family thing, right? So that's something that they have like the kids do because it's not a hard thing to do, right? So the kids, part of their chores or something on the farm would be to go around and to weed around some of these plants, right? So, and there's trapping. Sometimes the animals are larger. Sometimes the insects can be trapped. On the picture on slide 9 here, you can see there's like a sticky pad at the bottom picture. And you can put these sticky pads out and things that fly or things that walk around will be attracted to this substance, whatever it is, and they'll get stuck on it. So that's a way to trap them, right? So there's a bunch of different ways to try to control the pests. Once they become a problem, there's different ways to control them without using poisons. So those are all the sort of natural ways to do it. Then we move to slide 10. Slide 10. So now you've done all these methods. You've worked, you've done all those steps. You've added some of those biological controls or trapping or whatever, and it's still not working. They're still there. It's still damaging your crops. It looks like it's going to be an economic threat. The numbers are still really high. It's not really helping that much. Now we pull out the poisons, right? But we don't just pull out the poisons like in the bottom picture on slide 19. We do it like on the top. We do something called, less risky controls. It's called target spraying. All right. So we'll do some target spraying. So we'll look at the crop and we'll say, okay, the caterpillars, if they're the pests, we're just using that as an example. The caterpillars, the pests are really bad, and they're really bad in the southwest corner of the farm. They're not too bad in the front of the farm. They're not too bad in this corner, that corner. They're really bad in the southwest corner. So they will target spray with pesticides. They won't spray the whole crop. They won't spray the whole farm, all of the acreage. They'll just spray where the major problem is. And they'll do that by either putting tags on their back and protective gear and spraying hand by hand so they can get really in there. Or they'll do what you see in the picture up top, which is they'll put the pesticides on a tractor and they'll drive the tractor over the area that has the worst pesticides and they'll spray it directly on. The better part of that is you're not spraying things you don't have to. And also, you're not releasing it, and you're kind of spraying it right on the ground. So it's not going to spread too much. It's targeted. That's the point, right? So you target spray, and hopefully that takes care of the problem. If that doesn't take care of the problem and you realize, dude, these are all over the place, or they moved and they're not just in the southwest corner. They're growing. The threshold is, the action threshold, blah, blah, blah. Now it's time to pull out the big boy, right? Now you take out the plane, you fill up canisters with this poison pesticide, and you do what they call here broadcast spraying, what is commonly known as crop dusting. The plane flies over all of the crop and dumps all of this pesticide. That's a fine mist you see there. You dust all the crops with this fine mist of pesticides. You can see, and this is when we talked about pesticides last time, you can see that can become a big problem if the wind is blowing, if people are in the area. You see it right next to a road there. So that is when the problems of pesticides start happening, when we start doing these broadcast sprayings of non-specific pesticides. It is an absolute last resort, as it says in the slide, right? So that is the IPM steps. So you can see, we don't just jump on it and dump chemicals all over the place all the time. There is a process, and we try our very best, at least hopefully most people do, try their very best to control in other ways, right? All right, slide 11, just skip right over. It says guided practice. Slide 12, what does it mean for food to be organic, right? And I think this is on the quiz too, so I want to just go over it real quick. What does it mean for food to be organic? We know that organic food is clean and healthy and blah, 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 right? We know a couple things. But in order to be considered organic food, you need to have done a certain amount of these steps that you see here on this slide. Each of these steps need to be satisfied for something to be considered truly organic, right? So step 1 is no human sewage fertilizer can be used in the cultivation of the plants or the animals, because we know we have plants that are organic, and we also have meat and stuff, animals that are organic, right? So you can't use human sewage. Yes, human sewage sludge fertilizer is used. but you don't use it for organic food. Avoiding synthetic chemicals. This is the part that everyone knows, right? You don't use antibiotics. You don't use pesticides. You don't use genetically modified organisms, right? You don't use any food additives or preservatives. You just grow the food, or you just, grow the cow. That's all you do, right? So avoidance of all those synthetic chemicals. Also, the next one, use of farmland that has been free from prohibited synthetic chemicals. What that means is, if I'm a farmer and I've been using fertilizers and pesticides and all that stuff, and then one year I wake up and say, this year I'm going to go all organic. I can't because the land has to be free from fertilizers and pesticides and all that stuff for at least 3 years for me to be able to grow organic on it, right? So if you want to be an organic farmer, you have to find a farm that hasn't been farmed for a few years, or you have to find a plot of land that has never been used as a farm before, so you can do that. All right, so that's why it's a little bit difficult. Keeping detailed salary record or sales records and detailed written records for all of your processes is very important. You need to maintain strict physical separation. What that means is, if you want to be organic and you're growing, let's say, corn, right? So I have organic corn on my farm, but I'm also growing wheat and I'm growing other things that are not organic, right? I have to have physical separation on my farm between the organic stuff I'm growing and the non-organic stuff I'm growing. I can't use any of the same equipment, farm equipment. I can't use any of the same storage areas or processing areas. Everything has to be kept completely separate for this to be truly organic, all right? And of course, there are periodic on-site inspections done by the USDA. They do unannounced inspections of the area to make sure all of these points are being taken care of. If all that happens, and if you go through all of that, and if you abide by all that stuff, then on slide 13, here are your levels of organicness, I guess. You will see the top one says 100% organic, and the next one down says just organic. Those are different. 100% organic is 100% organic. There's no other way to say it, right? Organic is at least 95% of everything you're doing is organic. Okay, so there may be something. You may be using the same tractor to harvest the organic food as you do the other food. So therefore, you're not really separating totally, and you have to label yourself organic, not 100% organic. Okay. So those top two layers, you see those round circles next to them, that is the USDA certification for an organic food. Okay. You see those certifications in a store when you're buying something organic on a package or something, and you can feel confident that they have been inspected and that they are truly what they say they are. They are truly organic or 100% organic. Okay. So that seal is very important. Now, farmers don't have to have that seal. They don't have to put it on if they don't want, but anyone that has an organic or 100% organic farm wants to get that certification so they could say, look, we're real. And the reason for that is because if you look at the next two layers, there's a lot of things that aren't really real out there. So if you see something that's made with 70%, I think it says, or 75, I can't see. I don't feel like expanding the screen. 75% of organic ingredients, at least 75% of organic ingredients in that product, right? So that means 25% of that product could be made in other ways that are not organic. There could have been fertilizers and antibiotics and additives and all that other stuff, right? Now, they can still label it organic. A company can still label it organic if it has 75, and they use real weird wording. They can say, or made with organic ingredients, and you think that it's 100%. They don't have to put the percentage on it. So they can label something organic. You think it's organic, but it's only 75% organic. And it gets even worse because there's also a level where there's less than 70% organic ingredients, right? So as long as you have some sort of organic ingredients in your product, you can say it's organic if you word it the right way. And that sucks because if you're not aware of that as a consumer, you go to the store and you pull something off the shelf and it says organic on it. You're like, yeah, but really it's just one ingredient that they used in it that happens to be organic, right? So they're trying to dupe you. And the reason they're trying to do that is because organic food is more expensive. So they can charge more because you sit there and you pull off this bag that doesn't say anything, and you pull off this bag and it says organic on it. you might pay a couple dollars more for it if that's something that you're looking for, right? So in order to be perfectly certain that organic means organic, you should be looking for that round seal, the USDA seal, certification of organic food. That's what you should be doing. And if not, then you should really dig into the ingredients on the back of a package to see what is organic and what isn't. But I don't think they're legally responsible yet. I think they're trying to push for that, but I don't think they're legally responsible for listing what's organic and what's not. I think that should be a thing, but it's not right now. All right, slide 14 and 15 and 16 are sort of something that was supposed to be done virtually and all this other stuff, but this is not required for you to do. You can definitely use this as a study tool. I suggest that, but I am not collecting this from you, and I am not grading this from you, okay? I have given you 3 things in the materials today: the daily attendance signing. I've given you the slides that we've just gone through and broken down, and I gave you an exit ticket type thing. I think it's labeled quiz, but it's not a quiz. It's an exit ticket. So you should do that exit ticket. It's really quick, about IPM, and then and that's it. And you should turn that into me, but that's only like a couple minute thing. The reason why I didn't give you anything big and written right now is because the next time we meet, we have a quiz, and I want to give you enough time to study for that quiz and get ready for that quiz and get prepared for that quiz. If I were you and I was going to prepare for this quiz, I would go back to March 27th, because that's when the first materials came out for this quiz. And I would go to that lesson, and then I would go to all the other slideshows until this one, including this one. And I would study those, right? Or have those ready, have those in a folder somewhere where you can access them easily instead of diving through the classroom and scrolling all the time. Maybe put them all in the same place or something, so you have a good area to study and to refer to. The quiz, whatever the next day we meet is, the quiz is 8 questions with a couple that are multi-part. So it's about like 12 or 13 questions. They are short answer. They are like the quizzes that we have been taking the last 4 or 5 times. So they're not multiple choice. They're not fill in the blank. They are, right, give me a sentence, answer it this way, explain this. So there is some writing involved in that. I will go live for a little while in the beginning of the class next time we meet. And then I'll post the quiz just in case anyone has any specific questions before the quiz. You can ask live. Now, I understand that some classes I don't have any, I have 1 or 2 live viewers, and that's fine. I've been saying this. Some classes 10 pop in and watch it live, and other classes, there's 1 and there's 2, or there's a couple stragglers. That's okay with me, and that's why I'm sticking with YouTube, because it posts right to the classroom. And by the end of the day, when I go check the views on a lot of these videos, many classes are getting, there's 20, 25, 28 views sometimes. So that means that everyone's getting on at their own pace, and I'm okay with that. The reason why I'm live is just in case you have to get at me right now, face to face, talk, then I'm available for you, right? So that's why we do this. So I kind of treat these just like I'm recording a lecture, because a lot of the times there's not too many live viewers, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. If you're getting the work done, I don't care if you're logging on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and watching this video. I don't care if you're logging on at 10 o'clock at night and watching this video. As long as you're watching this video, so I can break these slides down for you and you know what's going on, you're good to go. All right. So I'm out of here. Next time we meet, I will go live for a little while and a quiz. I'm on from 8:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon every single day. So if you have issues, you have any questions, feel free to private message me at any time. I usually even check it at night sometimes. So make sure everything's cool. 3rd cycle is done. So next time I see you, it'll be 4th cycle. See you later.